Hello, everyone. It's Phil Jones from Projector Reviews, and joining me is Rob Brennan from Sony. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing well, Phil. How are you these days?
Great. And Rob is here to talk about some great new products. I love when Rob comes because every time he shows up, we have something new to talk about. Before we get started, we'd like to thank our sponsors, AV Pro Edge and Meridio, for helping me put on this year's Spring Projection Summit, where we talk about all things related to projection. And today, we're going to be talking about Sony projectors. And Rob, you guys have some news, don't you?
We absolutely do. It's Christmas has come early. I've got my whole Santa thing going on right now. But we are thrilled to announce three brand new projectors, not in addition to our lineup, but actually a pretty big shakeup of our product kind of assortment, our lineup. Essentially, we'll get kind of the big kind of surprise out of the way. If you're used to Sony lamp projectors, that ship has sailed because we are basically taking all of our lamp projectors and swapping them for new laser models. So we have three new models to talk about, but a much more condensed and high performance lineup in general.
I'd always say, man, I love these Sony projectors. If only if it had a laser without me
Right.
having to spend, the price of a small BMW to actually have it. Because there's something about having the low maintenance and the carefree operation of a laser, and
Exactly.
the quality of laser light sources are getting better and better. A lot of times, bulbs seem to be the ones that were chosen for high-end projectors under 10K for true home theater projectors because the quality of the light. And these days, the quality of the laser light sources and how manufacturers like Sony are utilizing those light sources are they're getting better and better and better. And I have been lucky enough actually to review one of their new projectors. So Sony was nice enough to actually give me the opportunity to review one of their new projectors, the XW7000ES. And I'll tell you straight up, Rob, I absolutely love the thing.
We do have three new models, the 7000 being as you mentioned, the highest tier of the three new, and I'm happy you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll give it back to me at some point. My theater room is lifeless
Yep.
without it.
There's actually three different models that we're going to be talking about: the 5000, the 6000, and the 7000. And you can tell that there's a lot of differences to these things. The first thing, it's a new design. Sony has had this same kind of design for their 4K SXRD home theater projectors for a while. And if you look at these projectors
Right.
cosmetically and the chassis of these units compared to those models, they look different. And a lot of that difference on the outside has to do with things you did on the inside, right, Rob?
Right, that's absolutely the case. That design language really goes back to our our initial launch 4K consumer projector, the XW1000, ES, with kind of the rounded front and the rounded top, and we largely kept that design language all the way down until we started to release lasers, and then the design started to change a little bit. But you're right, form in this case follows function. So not only do we have a new laser light engine, but we also have a new 4K native SXRD panel that we're deploying in these three new models. It's a little bit smaller, it's 0.61 inches.
Mhm.
The resolution has also changed. So previously we were doing what we would often refer to as DCI 4K or 4096 2160. And of course, there's no 4096 2160 content that consumers are using. So typically, if you paired the projectors with the 16:9 screen, there'd be a little bit of overshoot. Nothing would be projected in that area, but essentially it was just not very efficient. So the new imagers are 3840 2160, or what
Yeah,
you might
which
call
is basically
UHD 4K.
yeah, 4K UHD, which is what's similar to what you would see on a
Exactly the same.
normal projection screen. One of the benefits of that, Rob, is the old 4096 by 2160. There was always a little bit. It was wider than the standard aspect ratio, which
Right.
confused some people because they were like, "How come I can't get the pattern to fit on my 16:9 screen?" Because it was basically a 17:9. And even if you once you
Exactly.
got the pattern shot, there was still some signal overshooting the wall. Now all of the imager is used to fill a 16:9 by 9
That's
screen.
right. And there's actually another, we'll call it hidden benefit. In that when we spec a projector, let's say the predecessor to the 5000, the 325 ES, that was a 1500 lumen projector. but that's 1,500 lumens spread out over a 17:9 imager, which you're never going to use all of that imager anyway. So it wasn't the most efficient at getting all of the brightness produced by the lamp onto the screen. And so now that we're going with essentially a native 16:9 imager, when we say a projector is X number of lumens, all of those lumens are going to get out on the projector. And on top of that, the projectors are also brighter, which we're going to talk about here in a second, than the models they're replacing. So essentially, it's just a good overall improvement in performance. But going back to kind of your initial point, with a newly designed laser light engine and a newly designed native 4K SXRD panel, it's also translated into a smaller chassis overall with the new design language. So all these things kind of work together in terms of the overall story.
Exactly. So these are noticeably smaller and noticeably lighter, but the quality is still there. And that's one thing I noticed when I picked it up and I took it out of the box, was the fact that it was lighter. It's still built like a Sony, but it's just it's lighter. So any installer that's ever had to lift something like a 1025 or a 995 knows that they're pretty beefy boys. And this is and the size, smaller means it's easier to fit into more places while still delivering the same amount of output. Now we're going to talk a little bit about why this chassis got smaller. So the first thing was, Rob already mentioned the fact that the imager is smaller. And if anybody has cameras knows there's two types of cameras, maybe a full frame camera and an APS-C camera or micro 4/3 camera. The bigger imager requires bigger lenses, okay? But so you can get the same quality optics in a smaller lens if the imager is smaller. So going from what the original was, what 0.74 to the new one, which is what?
0.61.
0.61 means that if you went out and still got the same quality optics, but now the overall lens assembly is smaller. Smaller optical, smaller imagers in the unit, smaller optics relates to a smaller box. So
and that's really the third leg, let's call it, of this tripod. I mean, Sony certainly could have gone out and just taken the laser light engine and other projectors and paired it with our current SXRD panel and our current lenses and call that good enough. But ultimately, we wanted to make, essentially kind of starting from scratch, to say, well, a newly designed light engine allows us an opportunity to create a newly designed SXRD panel. And so we designed lenses specifically to be used in a smaller chassis, with a smaller, flange distance from the lens to the imager, and then also, for the overall chassis size as well. So we designed all of the kind of pertinent components of the projector to work harmoniously. So it's new imagers, new SXRD panels, new lenses, so we get the highest possible performance in this, small compact chassis.
And we know that SXRD panels just have amazing native contrast along with resolution, and that still is the case, right, Rob?
They're all native 4K. That's 3 individual LCOS panels, one red, one green, one blue. You get all color channels on the screen at the same time. So if you're sensitive to things like, the screen door effect or the rainbow effect, that's not what you'll experience, with the Sony projectors. And speaking of making our lineup more consistent, you mentioned the lasers. You also mentioned the Raptor, the GTZ380. That's the other really cool addition. A major component that we don't talk really a lot about in projection in general is your processor. How all of your images are processed, how they're controlled, how they're upscaled, matters. And so we have this kind of flagship processor, the X1 Ultimate for projector, that was deployed exclusively in the GTZ380. And now that has been deployed in all of these models as well. So we're talking about object-based remastering for HDR, object-based, upscaling for, resolution, object-based mastering, for color and for contrast. So overall, we're giving you the very best possible processing, despite the fact that we're talking essentially about our entry-level projectors.
Yeah, and now that's a big point, because when people saw the GTZ and you go, wow, look at this projector, GTZ 380 Raptor, how much is it? $80,000 plus lens. What? Who would buy that? Why would they make something so expensive? That doesn't fit in most homes. Well, think of it like a car company. A car company, they go out and they do crazy concept cars. So Porsche goes out and makes $1 million sports car. A lot of times they're not planning on selling a lot of $1 million sports cars, but what they learned making the $1 million sports car means that when you buy your $60,000 Boxster, a lot of technologies that they've learned on that crazy car gets brought down into the regular sedans. Porsche made $1 million hybrid sports car, and a lot of that technology for batteries and stuff and motors are now in the Taycan, which you can actually buy, or they're hybrids. So having that GTZ with all of the crazy laser light sources and the big optics and the big processor, a lot of that stuff does trickle down as years go on into the other products. And that's one of the things about the X1 Ultimate. If it can harness the power of a GTZ, it can harness the power of pretty much any projector out there. So it's good to see it actually in this projector.
Well, I was going to say, it really matters to kind of wrangle together the potential performance. Specifically, when you talk about the GTZ380, that's a lot of lumens. That's a lot of resolution. That's a lot of things. And essentially, without the right control, you can extract maximum performance. I can give, the keys to a high performance, a sports car to my 22-year-old son. He's not going to be able to extract maximum performance from that vehicle. It doesn't have the requisite experience. So, when we first transitioned and took, that X1 Ultimate chip from our television line and all the lessons we learned over decades with signal analysis from analog, predating digital, and wrapped all that into that processor and then transitioned it over to projector. It really was all about taking, the opportunity to be able to maximize the potential of the hardware. And that's really what we're talking about with these models. And now it's not just, a halo product, the GTZ380. If you get that same, efficiency, let's say, of hardware all the way down to the XW5.
It has a new laser light source. It has a new imager. It has a new processor. And the other thing is the optics. People see the optics and they go, well, the lenses have gotten smaller. And if I look at something like a 1025, you don't make those anymore, or you're probably not going to make those anymore. What happens to those great optics? Am I still going to get that quality, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you look at the new lineup, we've also made another really, I think, very interesting change in that we have completely redesigned the lenses for this new application, this new chassis. And so at the entry model, the XW5000ES, very similar to the model it replaces, which was the BW325. What we have is a lens that was designed specifically, for that model. As far as that ARC-F lens, we've essentially taken the same premise and designed a new lens for that as well. The cool change is that in years past, in order to access that level of lens, you needed to jump into our approximately $25,000 price point in order to gain that next step up in lens. But now with the new lineup, once we go into our XW6000ES, our new ACF lens. So we changed the name a little bit, but essentially it's still the same premise: multiple group, multiple element, all glass, spherical, all glass front component, to give you that ultra sharp image corner to corner, no matter how big you go. But you now have access to that next step up in lens at a much lower price point.
Yeah, and we have to keep reminding everybody that because the imager, the optical system is smaller, the size of the lens is smaller.
Right.
It isn't the fact that they skimped on the lens. The size of the lens matches the size of the optical assembly, and the optical assembly is more compact, which is one of the reasons why the lens doesn't look like a Canon anymore, but you still get the same quality. Like sometimes people go, well, some of your projectors don't use all glass lenses, they use some plastic lenses. Are plastic bad, Rob?
It's a great question. It's something we have to talk about quite a bit. So the first thing is that all of the internal components of all of the lenses are all glass, and it's kind of been that way for a while. But on some of our entry projectors, the outermost lens would be made of a resin composite material, and that's because we want it to be spherical, which creates a much sharper image. Now you can make a spherical glass. It's just incredibly expensive. And that was one of the reasons there was this big kind of price despair or price difference, let's say, as you stepped up into those ARC-F lens models. So essentially, having a front lens component that's not made of glass is essentially a way that we can give you higher than kind of typical performance at lower than typical kind of price point. But when you also consider the fact that, the new entry, we haven't really talked about this yet, but the new XW5000 is now a 2000 lumen laser projector as opposed to the 1500 lumen lamp projector that it's replacing. You're still at 2000 lumens, probably looking at up to maybe 150 inches in size, probably closer to 130, 140 kind of max to get a combination of high brightness and overall great contrast. And you simply don't need to go, quote unquote, all in at a lens on a screen of that size. It starts to matter more as your screen size increases.
Yeah, and the other thing too, people always say, well, glass is automatically better than plastic. Not the case.
Certainly
I guarantee
you can buy cheap glass.
99% of you out there, your glasses that you paid the extra money for are not glass. Okay, they're not glass. You pay a whole lot of money for a high quality plastic. Okay,
right, we pay extra.
So you're complaining that the lens you're looking at is not glass through a pair of plastic lenses. All right, so what happens is these days with quality of manufacturing, the purity of the transparency of the product is actually easier for people to do it with plastic these days than it is to do it with glass.
Right.
And look at it, your plastic lenses are thinner, more rugged, and offer better optics than grandpa's glasses. So just because you see something and it's supposed to be plastic does not mean plastic is the devil. If it's done properly, you end up with great optics with plastic. So use glass, we need to use glass, and use plastic when plastic works better. It's not a sacrifice. At the end
of it, it really comes down to, we can talk about specifications and, all day until we're all blue in the face. If you get an opportunity, and hopefully, anyone watching this has an opportunity to go to their, favorite retailer and they'll have a projector on display, go look at the picture performance of a Sony projector. And, it's phenomenal. How we achieve it, that's, Phil and I will talk about how we achieve it. We're nerds like that. But ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. If it looks good and it produces high quality image, high levels of contrast, accurate color, then what you have is a home run.
So this is a still photograph of a piece of video that I was looking at. This is a close-up, and you can read the text in that way off in the back. So when we talk about clarity and the ability to resolve all the resolution that's in a 4K signal, you can. Now the funny thing about this, Rob, another reason why I want to bring this up, I could read down here, I could read that Arabic right here, right? If I blow it up, or if I walk a foot or 2 feet away from my 120-inch screen. There is no way, I don't care how good your eyesight is, you could read that from 10 feet away or 12 feet away, which is close for a 120-inch screen or a 100-inch screen.
Yeah, certainly on the close side.
And the reason why I bring this up is you hear a lot about how come they don't make 8K projectors. If it was an 8K projector, I could read maybe the open sign in this window over there if I walked within an inch, if I walked within a foot of it.
Right.
But is that really a benefit to you while you're sitting on your couch 12 feet away? Or
and the question about 8K, it's a fantastic question. Part of the reason why, ultimately we're making native 4K SXRD panels is because the native part is so important to us. I'm not here to necessarily talk about what other manufacturers are doing or trying to do, but essentially, in order to make native 8K projection, whole of the ball wax, we wouldn't be talking about our projectors being smaller anymore. Exactly. We'd be talking about how much larger they've become because we'd have to have a much larger SXRD native 8K panel to make that kind of happen.
With a TV, if you want to make an 8K TV, you take two 40-inch 8K TVs, 4 of them, and you just don't cut the glass. And now you have an 80-inch 8K TV. You know how you make a 65-inch 8K TV, you take 4 32-inch 4K computer monitors and you don't cut the glass, and now you got a 4K, now you got an 8K thing. And a projector imager is only going to be so big. So now I got to add more pixels to this space. I got to put 4 times as many in the same space, or make the unit 4 times bigger. We just mentioned that the projector is smaller because the imager is smaller. If this went from a 0.74 to a 2.4, your projector would be the size of a refrigerator to get HDR, and your lenses would be the size of a beer barrel, and that isn't really the most exciting thing. So let's focus on, and for what are you going to be watching on it anyway? Right. So focus on maximizing the clarity of what you have. Things like better optics, things like better processing, things like higher contrast are going to be a far more visible benefit. Richer colors are going to be a far more useful benefit than having an 8K logo on the box.
Well, there's still a reason why, from time, depending on how much you like to go to the movies, but there's still a reason why from time to time for certain IP or for certain times of the year, we choose to go to the movie theater and watch, our favorite actors or stories or whatever on these massive screens that are at best in 4K. And we never walk out of there talking to the manager saying, "Hey, can I please have my money back? The resolution wasn't high enough." we don't even walk out of that theater, asking for our money back because the contrast was a little off. And I can't tell you how many times I go into a movie theater and I can tell the projector's out of focus. Yeah. But I quickly forget about that when I see, whatever movie I'm there to enjoy, eating my popcorn with butter flavor sauce. That's the experience that I'm going for. And the point is, you can have that same experience at home with the projector. High resolution is important, but there's a point at which other things become much more important to the experience. Okay. So
let's go in and talk about the new lineup. So Rob, why don't we talk about what's staying and what's going?
Sure, absolutely. So as you kind of see from the slide here on the screen, we have essentially 4 models that will be condensed down into 3 models. So the XW225ES is our current, I guess by the time this video airs, our previous entry model native 4K, that is being replaced by the XW5000. So as you transition to that model, we're going from lamp to laser, we're going the X1 processor to the X1 Ultimate, and we're also going from 1500 lumens now to 2000 lumens. So across the board, all in a smaller chassis, right? So across the board, a fantastic piece. As far as the separate there from the XW7000, that is now transitioning over to the XW6000. So similarly, going from lamp to laser, going from 1800 lumens to 2500 lumens now, so almost 40% increase in brightness there, and also the same uptick in terms of the processor. But we're also introducing the new ACF lens at that XW6000 series. So another improvement there. And then what kind of happens is the 1025 and the 915 are kind of combining forces together. Rather than having 2 tiers, one at $20,000 MSRP and one at 40, those are kind of coming together into a single piece, the XW7000. Regardless of which of those 2 models you were looking at, it is brighter regardless, so about 60% brighter than its predecessor. With the same overall improvements. So a more condensed lineup, a more focused, if you will, lineup, and then improvements across the board in terms of the size, in terms of the processing, and then of course going from lamp to laser, and in the case of the 715 to the 6000, going from the VW lens to the ACF lens.
And I will tell you that I've actually had the opportunity to review pretty much every projector on here, including the 1025 and the 915. We were awarded the 1025, a hot product, a premium home theater award. The thing looks great. And I will tell you, when I turned on the the XW7000, I was shocked how good that thing looked. And with 50, almost 30 or 40% more brightness, it was noticeable. And that really helps with HDR. You don't need on a 120-inch screen looking at SDR, you really don't need 3000 lumens. But on HDR, you do. And what happens is I can maintain more highlights without clipping while still having a higher average frame level. So more brightness means that HDR just looks way better. you know?
Right.
And that was one of the things. You have a bigger brain and more brightness with the same quality optics makes the HDR look better. And it was noticeably better. The one that I want to put my hands on now is that XW5000. You get a noticeable boost, 25, at least 25% more brightness, a laser, a better processor
Right.
for $1,000 more. That not even $1,000 more,
500. Yeah.
$500 more. That is an absolute, I think, home run. Now, there are some differences, and we'll talk about those differences in a little while. Now, I will ask you, Rob, what do I get when I step up from the 6,000 to the 7,000 for that additional funding? It's brighter, but what else?
Right. So what it really comes down to is, as you kind of see listed here, when you get that extra brightness, when you think about what brightness does for you, you'll oftentimes actually, so you'll remember this, clarity, color, and contrast, right? The three C's of picture quality, but that actually is the wrong order to talk about them. It's contrast followed by color and then clarity. By increasing the brightness of the projector, we, by extension, significantly increase the overall color volume that projector can produce. And so what we have here is a live color enhancer, which essentially is improved tone mapping for all of the expanded color volume for that particular model. The other difference between the two, and this is really kind of a minor difference, but you can see here on this slide, both the 5,000 and the 6,000 are available in either a white or black chassis, depending on the application and the environment. But for the 7,000, exclusively in black. Typically, you think of electronics at a premium price point, as black products, so that's what we're going with here. But essentially, what you're really getting is, you can look at this and you can say, oh, well, it's just brighter, and of course that's one way to consider it. But that brightness is so impactful in terms of the color reproduction, it makes a significant difference to the overall experience.
These are kind of going to throw people for a loop when it comes to your competitors, because for a long time they were like, look at how expensive a native 4K Sony laser projector is, and ours is only fill in the blank, $8,000 or whatever, or $10,000, or look, you could save money by getting a pixel shifting unit with a laser that's looks almost as good as native, but you don't have to spend 4 times as much. So now you're at that 5,000 is a world beater. Now I will point out there's one thing about it, and it's in red.
Lenses.
The quality of the lens is very good. But if you want to adjust the lens, you got to get off your couch and adjust the lens.
Because when you think about the model that we're replacing, the 325, so we had a motorized lens, but we would not have what we call picture position or lens memory. And so essentially, you could sit down on your couch when you're first, let's say, installing the projector and use the remote to adjust the shift and the zoom and the focus and get it lined up. And then you would never adjust it again. You essentially would set it for a 16:9 screen or a scope screen, whatever. But without picture position, you would not be recalling different picture positions based on the aspect ratio of your content. So essentially, when we considered this and we thought about, well, how can we, again, continue to reduce the size of the chassis? The 5,000 is slightly smaller than the 6,000 and the 7,000. The motorized lens essentially only provided a minor benefit to installation. But once the projector's up and running, there's no advantage to having a motorized lens or a manual lens. So now the only difference is once the projector is installed, or while you're installing a projector, you'll adjust the focus using the focus ring on the lens, and there will be knobs on the top of the projector for the the shift and the zoom. But then once it's set, it's set. And just like the previous model, lens memory picture position isn't available at that particular model. It's something you step up to get into. So it changes a little bit how those are installed, but it does not affect the actual kind of user experience or the performance once you actually sit down and watch the thing.
Basically, you got to get off the couch once. And it's going to take you another 5 minutes or 2 minutes to get it aligned. There's only a certain amount of funds they have to build a product. I've been dealing with products my entire life. They say we want to be at this price point. What's the best combination of ingredients to get there, right? And they said, what's a bigger benefit to a customer? This customer, a laser light source or a motorized lens? A bigger brain, a bigger processor, or motorized lens, better optics or motorized lens. Most people will look at it and say, long as I have the horizontal and vertical lens shift. That's the reason why I always have a lot of times a higher end home theater projector, because I need the horizontal and vertical lens shift because my screen is not perfectly aligned with my projector. So I don't care that I have to get up there when I first set it up to make that adjustment. So the horizontal and vertical lens shift is far more critical than being able to sit on my couch and focus it again. So this actually shows those two lenses, right?
Yeah, it does. And it was important, I think, and you kind of made this point already, but we really like that price point of the VW325ES. Just under $6,000 for someone to come in and get a native 4K projector from Sony, with our processing know-how and our experience. And so you're right. We evaluated all of those components and ultimately decided that we can make this change, give the customers still a better overall experience from laser, increased brightness, better processing, and change the installation slightly, but ultimately provide still a phenomenal performance for just under $6,000. You know how Sony does it, right? $5,999.99, MSRP.
There is a little bit of a difference in the zoom and the horizontal and vertical lens shift, but for the clients they're working with and the people those who are looking at a projector at this price point, at this price range with the screens that they're using and the rooms that they're using, most likely this is enough zoom ratio, horizontal and vertical lens shift to get the job done. If you look at the big boys, the 7000 and 6000, you notice that it actually has more zoom than the older ones and even more horizontal and vertical lens shift capabilities than the previous model. So you actually have extra flexibility, and it still has all its picture positioning and all the stuff that was available in the old units, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It still does. So overall, I think we're thrilled with the solution we've come up with. The performance is certainly there, and we're just excited for people to get their hands and eyes on these two products.
Okay, so to wrap it up, when we talk about features, and these are kind of the three key features they're working on: clarity, dynamic range, better HDR, expanded dynamic range for HDR, and expanded color volume. And you have features to support all of these, correct?
Correct, and you can see this in the listed down here. It really starts with, you can see the X1 Ultimate for projector really, across kind of for all three models. But the X1 Ultimate for projector really is a key component to improving the overall performance of just about everything you do, not just from the upscaling and the clarity of the image, but the accuracy of the color and the kind of the nuance control, of the contrast. But essentially, we really thought long and hard about how we can provide the overall most accurate picture quality to faithfully recreate, the creative intent, whether that's from your favorite, video game or movie or TV show, what have you. We really have decided to, focus in on these three areas. HDR continues to be a huge, exciting, driving factor in modern content, and we wanted to continue to improve the overall HDR expression from our projectors.
Okay, so I'm actually going to be working with Sony and Rob to put together an article for Projector Reviews to go over in detail all of this new tech. So make sure that you check out that article, and also be sure to check out the review on the XW7000ES. And I will tell you that I absolutely love this product, and we will go through and talk about what I liked about it, and I think you will be impressed with its overall performance. And to recap, there are three models that are going to be available: the 5000, the 6000, and the 7000ES. And the 5000 and 6000 is available in white and black, and the 7000 for you guys, for your big bad theaters, is available in one color, black, because that's what you should be having hanging from your ceiling. As you can see, great new lineup of Sony 4K home theater laser projectors. And be sure to check out our articles about these new models in the coming months on projectorreviews.com. So thank you very much for attending, and hopefully we will talk to you soon. Take care.